Welcome back to part 3 of my husband's incredible career journey. From once serving on the board of CrowdStrike to shaping some of the hottest startups in cybersecurity, Joe has become one of the most respected leaders in the industry. In this episode, we move past his early days, working in psych wards and even being interviewed by the FBI, to getting hired right after the infamous John McAfee, the brilliant but controversial character who founded the company, left. Joe went on to help create a culture of winners, believers, driving kickoff themes so powerful they became the blueprint other companies tried to replicate. When Joe walked away just 5 years later, McAfee had skyrocketed, doubling revenue from $1.2 billion to $2.5 billion, a transformation that still gets talked about in boardrooms today. So let's dive in. Welcome to your own home, Joey.
Good to be back again. Hadn't been kicked out yet.
So we just got back from a trip from Nantucket.
Yep.
And I think that trip got you, plus the cigar on the golf course.
Yes.
Got you a little sicky.
Yeah. Yeah, both worth it. Nantucket was awesome. Never been there. Been to Martha's Vineyard many times. This was always something I wanted to do. It was explained to me it's a small Martha's Vineyard, much more exclusive and kind of private and so on. Got over there. It was pretty crowded, but quickly adapted and had a fantastic time. Great restaurants.
How are you feeling, by the way?
I've been better. Made a mistake a couple days ago and had a beautiful Romeo and Juliet cigar, which is my favorite, with my neighbor Peter. And we thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm thoroughly paying for it.
Yeah, because you were kind of on the
bubble
of like getting better or getting sick, and that I think the cigar
pushed me over the edge. That and a couple Bloody Marys did the trick.
But dousing with NyQuil helps.
Yeah, NyQuil's is the gift that keeps on giving when you're needing to rally.
So what I always do? I always talk about what we're wearing, which I know is absolutely your favorite part of the podcast. But you look really handsome.
Thank you.
That blue looks amazing on you.
Great.
So, Joey, what are you wearing?
Well, these shoes are the Hermes, and the pants are a fellow we used to do custom suits and so on. He labels them 3106, and I can never pronounce the name of this high-end whatever it is.
It's Dolce & Gabbana.
Dolce & Gabbana. Okay, I didn't know that. All right. Well, anyway.
I actually saw you putting it on, so I put mine on.
Oh, nice.
So like kind of matchy match because it has the blue.
Yeah, good.
It's all the little details.
Color coordinated.
So I actually got both of our outfits from if you guys are ever looking for Dolce & Gabbana on sale, the Palm Springs Outlet Mall has the best Dolce, and I got a lady there. I got a guy, and we text back and forth. And she sent me these. It was right after the holidays.
Yep.
So I got you that and me this fabulous 2-piece set.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable mall. It's about 45 minutes outside of Palm Springs. And, they've got, 100 shops there of everything you can imagine high end.
Remember the first time we went there?
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, one and done.
We went into the Valentino store.
Yeah.
And you loved this gray 100% silk dress from Valentino. Mm-hmm. And do you remember what they said? It was like, so expensive, 90% off.
Yeah.
So
still expensive.
Yeah, 90% off the dress, and it's still being like $800.
Yeah.
And I knew Joe was about to go in panic mode because we had never been in the mall.
Yeah.
And
it was the first store.
Yeah. And I looked at Joe. I go, "Let's go. We got to get out of here."
Yeah. Yeah, that was great.
But to this day, I still have that dress, and I bought that
very,
probably
very nice.
10 years ago.
Yep. It's a great mall.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have some serious fun and do some serious damage.
Yeah. So the Nantucket trip, I thought, like you said, it was like our first time. We had fabulous restaurants. We had, 3 lobster rolls. We went on a sailboat ride. We went golfing, which we both played pretty well.
Right.
But my favorite part, this sounds so funny, was the duck fried French fries and putting the quality caviar on top at Crew.
At Crew, yeah. Crew's a really good restaurant. They say it's hard to get into, although you can't get reservations, but you can do walk-ups. And so we did it, 2 or 3 times?
Yeah.
And didn't have much trouble getting in and getting a seat. And we had a lobster roll there, which is phenomenal. You had those duck fried
I don't know
duck
why
fat
that was so
fried
exciting to me.
potato
Well, I
with
do know why it
caviar
was
thing.
caviar, but
It was right on the water at the end of the pier, and just a fantastic location, really lively. And yeah, we went there a couple times, and even though you can't get reservations. I mean, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
But you can do walk up.
what was your favorite part of the trip?
Well, I mean, the golf obviously was phenomenal. We played what they call a public course, very hard to get on. I think we called a week out, exactly when you could call, maybe 5 minutes before. And the reservation lady said, well, we have a 9:10 and a 9:30. Okay, we'll take the 9:30. You're busy. No, that's gone. How about 9:10? That's gone. So we ended up playing at 3:23, I think, which is going to be tight with the sunset. And we literally were coming up the 18th hole in the dark, but we finished.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, and we both played very well, and it was a links kind of course. So, had a lot of the heather and so on that you see when they play the British Open, so a lot of those kind of features. But an unbelievably well-kept course, as good as any private course I've been on, and well worth the money. It's $300 a round, so it's not cheap, but it was worth it.
I thought you were going to say your favorite part was my karaoke.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that was funny. It was
so bad.
It was so bad. The only good thing is the guy that followed you was worse than you were. But it was fun. We went to a place called was it Club Car? It was an old. No, that was a different place.
Yeah, that was the piano place.
Yeah, the piano place. That was a good spot too. So great spots there. Tremendous walking town. I think I did 25,000 steps one day, because you could walk from where we stayed, which was the White Elephant. Wouldn't stay there again, but we walked from there to downtown, probably half mile each way, and then walking around the town was phenomenal. Great shops. My favorite food up there is what's called clam with the bellies. It sounds kind of funny, but in New England you can get clams with they call them the bellies still on them, and normally when you get clams, they're clam strips if they're fried, because the bellies won't keep. You can't freeze them. So to be able to get those, I think I had them 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had them 3 times.
Clam rolls, yeah.
And like all the walking was necessary because of all the
Yes.
lobster rolls.
Yeah. And then probably some of the best ice cream I've had from the place called the Juice Bar.
Yeah, the line was literally around the block
Yep.
most of the times. And the time we went, there was finally there was not a long line.
Yeah. And then we did a bike ride across the island to a place called the Bluffs, which you could walk kind of in a neighborhood. It was a little bit odd, but the neighborhood was behind you, and you're walking along this path along the cliffs, and it was beautiful. And I don't know, 8-mile bike ride to there and back was 8 miles. So we did electric bikes, which made
Thank
it
God.
a lot easier.
Because it was still like 45 minutes there and back.
Yeah, it was a good workout.
Yeah, it was really good. I was exhausted
Yeah.
when we got back. But I do have a notes section for anybody. I keep my notes.
Yep.
So if anybody needs notes on what to do, what not to do,
Highly recommend it. We flew to Philadelphia and then in on a pretty big jet, so American Airlines, and then we did Nantucket to JFK on JetBlue. Again, big airline, so
yeah, the JetBlue Mint, that was the way to go.
yeah, and then from there back to LA.
So we're going to get into part 3.
Yep.
If anybody's listening to this, there's a part 1 and a part 2 where he's talking. Part 1 is his childhood career through college, and then our part 1 is, and then part 2, it's CA, different careers in Kentucky, and then part 3, we're going to start off where you got fired again, the 3rd time at Mercury.
Yep.
By a douchebag of a boss.
Yep.
You were, on the stage that he was. You were on the stage with him when all of this went down at Mercury, and this is right before you went on to McAfee. So how did this go down?
You mean the Mercury thing?
The firing.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we got acquired by HP. It was a great deal. We had gotten to $1 billion in revenue. We got acquired for 4.5, so it was a good outcome for a lot of people. And most of the executives took what's called their package and went stage right. And not knowing any better, I decided to stay. And I think I was a key part for them because I ran the biggest part of the business, North America, for Mercury. So they really wanted me to stay. But you have this thing when you get acquired where it's called a double trigger, where it's, if you get acquired, that's one trigger, but then they have to change your position to get the second trigger. So I had a double trigger. And but anyway, I decided to stay, and ended up going to work for a guy who was a hardware guy. The CEO at the time was a hardware person. He came from NCR, and it was his guy. And so, I was underneath him. And to be candid, he just didn't understand software. I used to say he couldn't spell software if you spotted him soft. I mean, he was just not real bright when it came to software. And I tried and tried and tried, to work for him. But when you're working for somebody that just doesn't know what they're doing, it's very frustrating. And we had this engine built at Mercury, and HP's a great company. I mean, the person who ran software, his name's Tom Hogan. He was a great guy. He understood software, and he was the boss worldwide. And this guy worked for him. And so anyway, it got to a point. I mean, I remember one time we were on stage and we were talking to both the Mercury and HP folks. So I was talking first to the HP people, explaining to them what Mercury did, and he was next to talk to the Mercury people and explain what HP did and how we're going to bring this together and so on. And we did these road shows. And the one I remember was in Dallas, where I lived at the time. There's probably 300 people in the audience. And, I did my thing and kind of explained to the HP folks what it is we did. And then he got up, and he literally froze on stage. I mean, stage fright, I don't know what you call it, but he literally, wouldn't say anything. And so I'm standing behind him, and I said, "Tell him your name." And, he told him his name. "Tell him who you are and what you do, and what your role is." And I was just like feeding him things to say. And that's the moment I just I can't do this. And so,
well, not only that, but you told me when you were telling me the story the other day that he was 6'7".
Yeah, he's a big guy.
And do you remember the one thing you said to me that you were thinking in your mind?
Yeah, he had told me at one time that he kind of prided himself on closing the quarter in his bathrobe because he would close it from his home. And I told him, I said, "Whatever you do, don't tell anybody else that." I mean, that's just such a bad visual to see you in a house robe and slippers, closing a quarter. So anyway, that was, it got to a point where I just couldn't take it anymore. So I went to Tom and said, I gotta take my package and leave. I just can't do this. And so anyway, I guess Tom talked to him, and I was on stage again, speaking to, a few hundred folks, and my admin, Nancy Bond, comes walking up to the front of the stage and said, "You got a phone call?" And I said, "Nance, I'm talking to all these people here. I can't just stop talking." She goes, No, they said it's urgent. So I'm thinking something with the kids or something. I said, "Well, I'll be right back, and you guys, carry on." So I went out in the lobby, and the guy said, "I'm firing you." I said, "Really?" I said, "So you're going to do that over the phone? You don't have the decency to come and do it in person?" "That's right." And I said, "Okay, well, I guess I'll take my package and go." And he goes, "Nope, you're not getting your package." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, when you terminate me without cause, the package is mine, and that's rightfully mine, and I plan on getting it." And he goes, "Well, I plan on fighting it. And we got plenty of attorneys looking for things to do, and, we'll just see about that." And I said, "Yep, we'll see you in court." So I went and hired a...
what the funny part about that story was, he said, "Well, we have a ton of lawyers." And you go...
Well, I just said, I've got, my own lawyers, and I'm in the right.
No. So when you told me the story, it was so funny, Joe. You said that he was like, "Well, we've got a ton of lawyers," and you go, "All I need is one."
Yeah, that's right.
It was so classic.
Yeah, that's all I needed, because I got this guy, and he did it on contingency because it was an open and shut case, and so anyway, ended up working out really well. So I got everything that was due to me. HP did the right thing. They're a good company. And, and I remember saying to Tom, I said, "You'll fire this guy within a year." Mm-hmm. And sure enough, he did.
Yeah. And then you were telling me that, the guy was 6'7", and after, I think you were saying while he was firing you or something, you, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, "I bet he doesn't have an athletic bone in his body."
Yeah. So it was actually a great outcome because, it forced me to kind of leave a bad situation that wasn't going to work out and go to McAfee. So
you ended up getting recruited by Dave DeWalt, Roger King.
Yep.
I've heard this story a couple of times, not even about the recruiting, but you said that they took you for the best sushi dinner you've ever had to recruit you. And I was always wondering, was it really the best, or were you just so excited about this opportunity at McAfee?
Well, it was a combination of both, and Dave was very persuasive. He's a selling CEO, as I like to say, and he's full of charm and charisma, and he's a great leader. We did great things at McAfee under him, And it was at the MGM in Las Vegas, and they were there for some technology show. And so we went to dinner, me and Roger and Dave. And I think it was a combination of the sushi was so good and there was so much of it. I mean, because what they were trying to do was sell Dave on having future kind of meetings and so forth at the MGM. So everything was comp to him. And so we ate, I mean, literally to the point where it's almost, had to wave the white flag. It was just unlimited. And we had a great time. And, I made up my mind right there and then that I'd come in and run North America for him, and ended up being a great deal.
And Dave, I know, was a big mentor for you. So when you first came on, is there anything that he did in particular that influenced that?
The first thing I noticed with Dave is he was very, so McAfee, to paint the picture, was in really bad place. I mean, John McAfee had been gone for a while before I got there. He had nothing to do really with the company, and he went off into crazy land and did all the things he did.
Don't just skip that. The highlights there.
Yeah.
About John McAfee. If you haven't seen the documentary, people should go see it.
Yeah, he was. He's really out there. I mean, I know that he did. If anybody knows what bath salts are, those are the things people take and they go so crazy on them that they eat people's faces off. I mean, it's like the worst kind of drugs you can ever do. Turns people violent and so on. And he did a video on the internet of how to safely do bath salts. It's like stuff like that. And of course, the documentary, he was a genius. He's brilliant. But like most brilliant geniuses, he had a crazy side. And I think sometimes the crazy side got the better of him. So
did he end up killing himself?
No, they, there's a lot of controversy around that. He ended up in prison. The whole documentary, you should watch it, but he was down in Belize and his neighbor got murdered. I'm, convinced it was probably him over some barking dogs. And it's really kind of almost like a made up movie, because when the authorities came to, arrest him, he hid in the sand with a straw sticking out until they left, and then somehow escaped out of the country over to Colombia or some South American country, I forget which one, faking he had a heart attack. And they brought him back to the United States. It just goes on and on and on. And you watch this documentary and you realize, he was brilliant, but he was crazy. Mm-hmm. And it's highly entertaining.
And then so he left. And then when you started working there, I mean, McAfee was not in a good place.
They were $1.2 billion, which sounds like a lot, but half of it was consumer, which is what you put on your personal computer, and half of it was what's enterprise, which is big corporations. In consumer, they were doing really well next to Symantec. So Symantec and McAfee were big rivals. In enterprise, they were doing really bad. I mean, they had controversy around what's called channel stuffing, which, what that means is you use partners in security to sell to customers. So there's an intermediary between you and the customer. And what you have to do is make sure that the customer has signed their end document in order to book the business. So it comes, customer signs it, goes to the partner, and then comes to you. And when I got there, they had been just doing deals with partners and loading them up with inventory with no end customers. And that's not allowed. And so there was a lot of people in trouble. I mean, some of them were looking at jail time. I mean, it was really bad. The CEO had to resign, and it was about as low as it could go. Mm-hmm. And so the morale was, below ground level. And the thing I noticed about Dave, the first thing I picked up on, because I've always tried to be kind of a servant leader. Like if you help people get what they want, you'll get everything you want. And I'm not saying to say it, you have to really live it. But the first thing he did, so McAfee had a location in Dallas, Plano actually, that was a big location. It was inside sales. It was the bookings part of the business, the finance. Support was there. So there was 1,000 people in this building. And then they had the corporate headquarters out in Santa Clara, in the valley out there. And it was smaller, a smaller location. But the first thing Dave did when he became CEO is he came down to Plano, and his first day on the job, he stood at the door about 6 a.m. with some bagels and donuts and coffee and said hi to everybody that came in the door. I'm Dave DeWalt. I'm your new CEO. Who are you? What do you do here? I really look forward to being, in the boat with you and helping McAfee do some great things. And so that personal touch from a CEO really made an impact on me, and I think a lot of people in the company, especially in the Plano location. I'm sure he did it in Santa Clara and so on. So he just had that gift for making people feel, like they were important, and because they are, and so I picked up on that, and that's what started a really good relationship with Dave.
So you got hired to run North America.
Yes.
And I love your idea, and I'm sure a lot of people do it, but can you tell us more about skip meetings and how that was one of the very first things you did when you got there?
Well, the first thing
What is a skip meeting?
It's called skip level meeting. So the first thing I did when I got there, because I'm a big believer that there's a book I read, and I highly recommend it to anybody in business. It's called Good to Great, which is Jim Collins is the author. And what he talks about is if you really want to do a turnaround and do well in a company, you get the right people on the bus and you get the wrong people off the bus as quick as you can. And so the first thing I did was I reached out to my right hand at Mercury, this is McAfee. And McAfee was, he was my right hand, ran the SE or technical organization in sales, and I ran kind of the sales folks. So we teamed up together. And I reached out to Mike, and, as fate would have it, he was in an unhappy situation at the company he was with. So the timing was good. And I said, I got this situation where it's a turnaround, and I need your help. Why don't you come over here and help me do this, and let's have some fun. And as fate would have it, he decided to join. And so he and I, kind of teamed up. And what we would do was every quarter, at the end of the quarter, we would pick top performers at front line. So in other words, a sales rep, an SE, which is a technical, counterpart to the salesperson, a partner, a person, a channel person, a inside salesperson, and they would be like 15 of them in all. So maybe 3 or 4 each. And we would pick them based on their performance the quarter before. So it was almost like a reward. And we bring them in the night before, and we'd have dinner with them. So that was kind of the reward. You got a chance to meet Mike and I, and we got a chance to meet you and spend some good quality time together. And then the next morning, they had to bring 3 things that were broken. Not 3 things that were fixed, but 3 things that were broken. And we published the fact that here's the people that were coming to this meeting to the entire organization. So if you have something that's a burning problem, you need to make sure this guy or gal knows so they can bring it to the meeting. And so what we would do is we would go around the room, 15 people, and we would cover, the issues themselves. And the thing we would say to people is there's 3 answers you're going to get. That's a great idea, we're going to fix it, and here's the date we're going to fix it by. Or it's a great idea, but it's not in the budget, or we can't fix it right now, so the answer is no. Or it's a great idea, we can't do it yet, but we'll reconsider it in this time frame. And then if we decided to do it, we would assign an owner. So if it's a marketing problem, we give it to the CMO. If it was a support problem, we give it to Barry McPherson, the guy who ran support, and so on, and then publish that in a spreadsheet so people could see. These are the problems we're working on. Here's the date we gave that they would be fixed. Here's the person that's accountable. And what people took from that is they were heard. And it's so powerful. And the rule was, I didn't want to know who your boss was, because your boss wasn't the issue. Nobody's going to get in trouble. It was a safe environment. I could care less about your manager. I wanted to hear, what the problems were at your level. And the best example I'll give that, I knew we were on something that was significant was when we first did it, and people would freak out because the first person would take an hour to talk about 3 problems. And so I knew what was happening. The other 14 people were like, holy cow, that's 15 hours we're going to be here. What ended up is as you went around the room, the problems started becoming the same. So by the time you got to person number 6, they only had 2 problems. By the time you got to person number 10, 1 problem. And then by the end, it was like they've all been covered. Because the problems were pretty much across the organization, just nobody wanted to talk about it. And the one that was the best example was in Plano, where there was 1,000 people and 300 people on this one floor. There was only 1 bathroom. And so like 3 people brought this up. And so finally I said, are you serious? This is the biggest problem? And they're like, yeah, Joe, you're traveling all the time, right? Imagine at lunch when there's 300 people trying to go to the bathroom. And so I don't know what it cost me, $25,000, $30,000 to put in another bathroom for, guys and gals, and morale went through the roof. And it went through the roof for 2 things. Number one, they could go to the bathroom. but number two, because they'd been heard. And they were like, at your level, you're busy and so on. Why would you care about that? And, there's example after example, you do care about it because that's what's causing, people to not be happy and hurting morale and so forth. But the key to it is you'll never know unless you have that kind of meeting, because the manager filters it and they don't want to bother you with it. They don't want to come to you directly for it. And anyway, it was something that was highly effective.
I love that. I feel like if people could hear that, that's going to help them in their businesses. And so as far as like financially where the company was, there wasn't like any spark. There wasn't much motivation. It was, like I said, in the dumps. Can you tell us about the legendary meeting by the sea?
Well, it was the first thing that we did, Mike and I, is we went to a meeting and it was some conference, and we were brand new, and we were watching this guy on stage, and his name was Brian Kenyon, and unfortunately he's since passed away. But what a brilliant guy! I mean, he was up on stage, and he had gotten this slot machine and somehow hacked into it and made it start spitting money out in the audience. And so Mike and I are like, that guy,
Who is this guy?
Who is this guy? So we cornered him after he came off stage, and we're like, dude, you got to join our team here because we're here to change this thing. And he's like, I came in through this acquisition. George Kurtz, who ran a company called Foundstone, had been acquired by McAfee.
Founder of CrowdStrike.
Now the founder and CEO of CrowdStrike. So very, very brilliant, successful guy in his own right, of course. But he had worked for George as part of this company, Foundstone, small company. And as typically goes, McAfee is a big company, acquired the small company, and the small company kind of feels crushed, right? It's hard to get heard, and there's all kinds of bureaucracy, and it's no fun, right? And so Brian's like, I'm out of here. I'm not staying. This is no fun. And so we did the hard press on him for about 30 minutes. We had him cornered and finally convinced him, just give us a chance. And so sure enough, we all got together and built this, what I call a first meeting deck, which I think is the most important thing you can do in any sales organization. So what do your reps say in that first meeting? Because if it's not good, you don't get the second meeting. And if it's not the second meeting, you don't get a sale. So we put together and we built this first meeting deck of what we think the story should be for McAfee. And we presented it at Roger's staff meeting at a worldwide level. And I remember when Mike and I stood up and gave the pitch with Brian's help. I mean, Roger was blown away, and the entire team was blown away because we were literally like 2 weeks in. And they're like, how'd you come up with that? And we're sitting there thinking, how'd you not come up with this? I mean, it was kind of like the obvious story for us. And so that was kind of the beginning. But as we started to compete against Symantec, so Symantec was the number one enterprise, big company customers, and we were a far distant number two, way, way down there. They were really putting it on us in a pretty big way. And so in order to beat Symantec, you can't just change the technology overnight. We literally just changed the story. And so
that was the meeting by the sea.
Yeah, it was at a place called Asilomar, which is right outside of Monterey. It's a beautiful location, very remote, very charming, but no cell service. And I did this on purpose because I didn't want anybody to be distracted.
That's why it's called legendary. Because if you ask Mike Fay, to this day, he'll still say, "Who has a meeting where you can't get on your phone and get cell service?" To you, it's brilliant, but to them, they're still like,
"Yeah, I'm sure everybody was miserable." But we got people across the company from marketing and product and support, and I mean anybody who was in any organization that had a voice at a leadership level. We got them all to come to the Silmar, and and it was you were doubled up in a cabin, I think, so that was not popular. There was no cell service, but it was a great 2-day meeting. And in that meeting, we tried to come up with what is the ultimate story to go and compete and beat Symantec. And we came up with what's called SCP, is the initials, which is Security Connected Platform. And basically what we did was we told the story. It was true. So, we had this capability. It's just nobody was talking about it. But so you could literally bring all these different elements of security, because there's 50-some products, and bring them into a single screen. And it was much more efficient, much more cost-effective, so you got a lot more value from it. Whereas Symantec had to have several screens, several groups of people, way more expensive to run. And so we went to the market with, look, we've got better security, but a much better business value. And so business value became a theme because it's what I've done throughout my career. I'm a strong believer nobody buys technology for technology's sake. They buy it to solve problems in business that creates a business outcome that is much better than anybody else. And that's what Security Connected Platform spoke to. And I even on people's business cards, which is another unpopular thing, on the back of them, and that's back in the day when everybody had business cards, but I made everybody have on the back of their card, have I proven McAfee's value today? ? And reps were like, why are you doing that? And I said, because I want you to be able to defend that. And I want you to be able to explain to these customers how they're getting more business value from us than they could Symantec or anybody else. And so that was the beginning when we came out with that approach. And as fate would have it, we went from number 2 to number 1 and really put it on Symantec in a big way.
Love that.
Hurt him badly, and of course we won big. And it was just simply changing that story with everybody's cooperation. I mean, from development all the way through to sales. I've always said in technology, you got to build it. That's the base of the spear, and you got to be able to sell it. That's the tip. And everybody in between is there to support those efforts. And when you get everybody lined up, behind one message, it's very powerful. And then what we did was we went to the sales reps and said, you're going to be certified on this message. And what's that mean? Well, you're going to have to stand up in front of somebody who's not your manager and give that pitch and be certified. And you got 3 chances. And if the third time you can't tell our story, you're out. So there's a lot of pressure. But I really believe that if you can't sell our story, then you shouldn't be here. And so to really make a fine point of that, we had a sales kickoff, kind of drive that point home. And it was so important to me that everybody could tell that story. I said, okay, here's the thing. There's 2,000 people come to this kickoff. I'm not going to tell you who I'm going to pick, but I'm going to pick one of you out of the audience to come up on stage and give that pitch. And so, obviously what everybody did was start freaking out that it's going to be me. It's like winning the lottery, except you're not winning. It's a losing. And so the entire, it's towards the end of the conference, so I could tell the tension in the in the air. And we ended up having a person come up, Eric Apple, who now runs sales for Island, come up and give the pitch, and he blew it out of the water. Now, what nobody knew, and I think Eric since spilled the beans, is Eric was really, really good at doing it. So we didn't want to have somebody come up there and just totally fold. So he was pre-selected,
Pre-picked.
But nobody knew that.
Yeah.
And so I can assure you that everybody was ready.
And wasn't later on he spilled the beans, and you're like, why'd you tell that? Nobody needed to know.
Yeah. But anyway, so it was, and he killed it. I mean, he probably gave it better than anybody in the audience for sure, and set the bar. And we recorded it, and then everybody, had to. And actually, I recorded myself giving it as well, and that was kind of what we used to certify people.
And then you mentioned the word kickoffs. In our conversations, you're kind of famous for your kickoffs. You've always had themes. It's hundreds of people. It's the beginning of the year, almost like a new season, new football season. And your themes are, once again, the word legendary. You've had Winners Want the Ball, TNT, which is your email address.
Yep.
Today, not tomorrow.
Not tomorrow.
But there's this one theme that you had called RKK. And for me, when you tell me these stories and you share with others, that is one of the most fascinating, incredible stories. And the fact that you used, I'm not sure if you put on their cards, their emails, or RKK the rest of the year.
Yep.
I would love for you to expand on that story.
Well, the first thing I think that I tried to do at kickoff was have a common theme that would drive the year. So, and usually I got together with leadership, and again, I had great people. So McAfee, he had a team of folks. Kenyon, of course, was on there, and just Braden Rogers, and I'm going to leave people's out, so I'm going to quit naming them, but just an unbelievable amount of talent. Julie Soakley, who, again, unfortunately since has passed, but she was my right hand when it came to operations and operationalizing things. So we'd all get in a room, and we talk about the company and what the company needed.
How many people are we talking?
2,000 would be at a sales kickoff. So there's a fair amount of people. So, and the first year, what I thought we needed was positive thinking, right? So I've always been a big believer. Zig Ziglar is one of my mentors that I looked up to. You know, the power I see at the top. Norman Vincent Peale, the power of positive thinking was another one. Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich, and it's all around visualization and positive thinking. And so I'm a huge believer in that, and always have been since I was a sales rep. And so with McAfee, the thing that, you know, I was thinking is the place is in the dumps. And so we've got to get people believing that they can do it. And so the story that, you know, that I ended up telling was RKK. And, you know, it was a story about when I was in college. My college roommate had a baby brother who lived upstairs. And anyway, he was kind of like typical baby brothers. He was always trying to keep up with John, who was my college roommate. And John was studying to be a lawyer. And Kelly was his younger brother, wanted to be an engineer. So their dad was I think a chemical engineer for Ashland Oil. Very, very brilliant guy. I mean, all three brothers were unbelievably brilliant. And Kelly, you know, had done what a lot of people do in college, had a really good time. And in the University of Kentucky, where I went to school, in a major, there were certain core classes, and if you failed them 3 times, you're out. So he was on his 3rd try. It was a class called Fluids. Now, what I found was the shorter the name of the class, usually the harder it was. And especially in engineering, it was extremely difficult. And in addition to that, usually when a test possibility is 15, which is what this was, versus 100, it was hard, right? So he came to me and said, I need your help. Because I was, even in college, kind of looked at as one of those crazy positive thinking guys. And because I'd been working, I went to school for 2 years, dropped out for 4, and then came back and took 2 years and a year. So I'd been out in the workforce. And so I was a big believer in positive thinking, visualization, those kind of things. And anyway, he came to me and said, I need your help. I said, happy to help. How can I help? And he said, well, I've got this final coming up, and I failed the class twice. If I fail the 3rd time, I can't be an engineer. And more than anything, I want to be an engineer. I said, well, okay, what's the possibility? He said, there's 15 points, and I've got to get like a 12 in order to pass this class. And the most I've gotten is 5, something like that. I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but it was, you know, way, way down there. And so, you know, the professor said, you know, look, you're not going to get a 12, right? You're just not that kind of student. Go ahead and go do the nickel beers and the quarter shots and have a good time. Don't worry about this final because you're not passing. And he goes, Joe, I want to pass. And he said, can you help me? And I said, yeah. I said, here's what I want you to do, Kelly. I said, I want you to go and I want you to put on your mirror in writing, you know, this is what I want to do. I want to pass this class, this final. I want to get a 12 specific, and here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to study every day for X number of hours and so on. And I said, and so what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, I want you to look at it in the morning. I want you to look at it in the afternoon. I want you to look at it before you go to bed. And the important part is not just looking at it, but to actually do what's on that piece of paper. He goes, I'll do it. And sure enough, we didn't see Kelly. I mean, he went and studied and studied and studied, and he was like a hermit. Of course, we were out partying, having a good time, and so on. And so anyway, come the day of truth, we're sitting there watching college basketball, which at University of Kentucky was a very popular thing to do. And Kelly comes in, and he's got this envelope. And he said, I got my score. I said, okay, what'd you get? He goes, I don't know. I'm too nervous. I can't open it. And he said, would you mind opening it for me? And I'm like, no. So, you know, out of respect, we put the TV on mute, didn't turn it off. We still watched the game, but we put it on mute. And I started opening the envelope. And he said, before you open it, I just want to tell you, I lied to you. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, the professor told me I didn't need a 12. I needed a perfect score. And he didn't give out perfect scores. And so you might as well quit. I mean, it's impossible. You're not going to be able to do it. I don't care. You know, I've seen enough. That's why he told me to go and hit the bars. And I said, Kelly, you'd have been right, because I wouldn't have told you to do it, because it's impossible. And he goes, I know. He goes, but I at least wanted to give it a shot. I said, well, no matter how this turns out, I guarantee you're going to get way better score than you've ever gotten. And you're going to learn that this works. And, you'll need to choose a new line of, profession, but, at least you've learned something good. And so I opened the envelope and looked at the letter and I just dropped it. And I can still remember it kind of floating across the room. And John, his brother, dove across the room and grabbed it. And it's like a 15. And, I can still see that picture in my mind's eye. And we were just like hooping and hollering. And it was really incredible. And the thing I learned from that is that even myself, I never would have thought that would have been possible, and would have told him, don't try, just come and have fun with us and let's have a good time. And Kelly went on to not only be an engineer, but he went to law school, like his brother. And he became a big time attorney. I know he was in New York and DC and big time law firms and so on. And so the theme, because I'd been teasing people with RKK. So the theme of this year's kickoff is going to be RKK. And it got to be a thing where everybody started guessing, what's it stand for? Of course, nobody was going to get this. And so at the end of telling the story, I said, what RKK stands for is remember Kelly Kaiser. So when you're in the valley, you don't think you can do it, looks impossible, because that's sales. Sales is, you get way more no's than you get yeses. And when you're in that valley and you feel like you're defeated and you can't do it, remember Kelly Kaiser. And so the rest of the year, every one of my emails, every one of my, anything I did to announce and talk to the sales force was RKK. And everybody knew what that stood for. So that was the first one.
That was an incredible story, Joe.
Yeah.
And how many times I've heard that story? A lot, right? Yeah. But I'm listening to your story again. You get to the end, and I tear up.
Yeah, yeah. There was people who came up after the story, and some of them I can picture in my mind's eye that they said they're very emotional.
And,
so
it also goes to the fact that you're a great storyteller, and that's really helped your career.
Well, I mean, it's easy when the stories are great, and that was a great story, and so that was the first theme. And then each year we did successive themes. I think the next one was next one was Winners Want the Ball.
I remember the video because
Yeah.
I threw a retirement party for you. There was so many people that came. By the way, you're still working. I guess we'll have to do another retirement party one day. But I remember the video, and you got the big bouncy blow-up beach balls, and everybody was hitting them in the audience, and that's
Yeah.
how you got them all fired up.
Yeah, it was. So that one was. We're a big company, and we wanted the theme to be, that everybody matters, and the only way you win. And I used to have this corny thing I'd put out: together, everyone achieves more, which the initials stand for team, right? And I really believe that. I really believe that each individual together as a team is way more powerful than the individual themselves. And so, big company, 2,000 people in this kickoff. How do you get that message across that, I want you to own this thing, right? Because I've always told people as a salesperson, you're the face of the company, right? It's not DeWalt, it's not me, it's not any kind of management, it's the sales rep and the SEs, the people on the front lines. And so therefore, since you're the face of the company, you need to represent the company and own it. And so Julie actually was a big part of this, and Faye and all of his team. And so we came up with this kind of concept. And, again, I was teasing people, WWTB, and everybody was guessing, what's it stand for, and all kinds of crazy guesses. Can't remember some of them. But anyway, so I walk out on stage, and there's about 10 big beach balls, huge. And without saying a word, I just kicked the beach balls into the crowd. And so you can imagine it's like at a concert, everybody starts bouncing the beach balls
Totally.
around. And glasses are getting knocked over, and it's getting chaotic, and this goes on for probably 2 or 3 minutes, and it gets to be it's like a deafening din, the noise. And so finally I said, okay, everybody grab a ball. Nobody grabbed a ball, right? As I thought and so they kept going on. And so I finally said, look, whoever grabs a ball, you're going to get a $300 gift certificate for dinner, your choice. And all of a sudden everybody grabbed a ball. And so I said, okay. Now that the 10 balls are grabbed, take them back there to Julie. She'll take your name. You'll get a $300 gift certificate. And then what I did was I laid out the story and I always tried to personalize it. So what I did was I laid out the story using all kinds of videos. I think Tim Tebow had a video, Michael Jordan, a lot of good sports analogies with business. And I told the story that, even though it's easy and fun to pass the ball, right? Because you just saw it. I mean, how fun was that? The hard part was grabbing the ball. And so when a customer had a problem, when your colleague had a problem, somebody at work for you, somebody you work for, if you have this attitude that, I own the ball, and in sales in particular, it's on me first, and I've got a whole team to help me, but, personal responsibility and individual, excellence is what makes a great company. And so we had these series of videos that took everybody through it. And then I gave examples, because I always tried to personalize it with specific people. So-and-so last year, he or she wanted the ball, and I gave examples of what they did. And then as the year went on, and it's always been curious to me. So the cheapest form of compensation is recognition. But in sales, ego has, you got to have a big ego to be in sales, because, you get a lot of no's. And so you got to have the ability to overcome that. But to give people recognition is sometimes more important than money, because that's what people want. Now, I've always said that, we'd have these company end of year events at club. And so everybody who qualified for club went to this big trip and so on, and they got to bring their spouse or, a friend or whatever, but they got to have a guest. And at the awards dinner, which was the last night of the club, you got up and you gave these awards to people. And I always said, if you notice the really big awards, like the sales rep of the year, the manager of the year, the SE of the year, and so on, they never sat in the front, because they knew they were up for a big award. They always sat in the back. And the reason why they did that is because, and when you watched them, sales rep of the year is so-and-so. They would get up in front of their spouse, in front of their friend or whatever, in front of their colleagues, and wind their way through, slapping high fives and so, because that was their moment. I mean, so for 2 or 3 minutes, they were it. And so what I did throughout the year was each month, I would give out a football, and on that football, or it might have been every quarter, but it was each, accounting period, and I would put on that football to so-and-so and what they did, and then signed, and then said, winners want the ball, always. And so I carried that theme throughout the year with a physical, and I learned this way back in the day at CA. So when I ran this division at CA, we had, 300 people or something like that. And I had this blow-up shark. It probably cost me $5. And each month, I would choose somebody as Shark of the Month. And we would ship that blow-up shark, and they would hang it above their cube. And it was like proud as peacocks, right? I'm the Shark of the Month. And it just, it inspired me to know that people like recognition, right? They want to know that if I do what I'm supposed to do and overachieve, somebody notices. And it always blows me away sometimes how little people realize that. But it's true. And so winners want the ball. I mean, I've got people to this day that'll come up and say, I've got 2 of your footballs in my office, And so that was the second theme. And then today, not tomorrow, TNT. That's the one I've got on my email address, because I really believe in sales, time matters. And that one was one where, we were starting to see where business was getting big and business was getting good and so on. But at the end of a quarter, deals mattered that they closed before the end of the quarter. And so to give you an example, at McAfee, at the end of the quarter was literally 2:00 in the morning, because we were a California company. So midnight out there was 2:00 in the morning Dallas time. So we could take deals all the way up until 2:00 in the morning, and wherever you were, California was midnight and so on. And I gave an example when we did TNT of one of my best guys, and love this guy to this day. His name is Ross Allen. We call him the Rossweiler. He's one of the best guys I ever had to work with.
He's a big old guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And so anyway, he ran Canada and the Northeast, and then he went over and ran the UK for me. But he was just he was a hard-driving, really good leader. His QBRs to this day are some of the best QBRs, quarterly business reviews that I've ever seen. But he had this deal. And I remember being in Dallas with him, and it came in at like 2 minutes after midnight. And I can still see the vein on the middle of his forehead sticking up because he was so stressed. And so I used that as an example, and Roscoe, as I called him, he was good for me to use it because it made a point. And so time mattered. Mm-hmm. And so TNT was one of those themes we thought we needed that year. that, every month matters, every quarter, of course, matters, and time matters. And so we did some things to drive that point home. And it looked like a little TNT plunger, the stick of dynamite plunger has TNT like this, and gave those awards out. So there's always something visual to go with it.
You still have one of those in your office.
Yeah. There's a lot of people I know that I've talked to. Even today, I can see it in their office where they have some of those awards.
So one of my favorite stories of your time there, because you were running North America, but you had an effect in Japan as well.
Well, I ran North America and then eventually got promoted to run worldwide. And my boss at the time, Mike DeCesar, got bumped up to president, and then I became the executive VP for worldwide sales. And so I took over Japan.
So one of my favorite stories, though, not sure which one you're going to go down, but the one I would like to hear is when you went over there. It's a different culture, for sure, but through your brilliance, you somehow ended up getting all the ladies karaokeing.
Yeah, so people told me when I took over global, this is going to be so different because the cultures are different. And there's even a book, it's called Kiss, Bow, and Shake, something like that. But it's a book that talks about the different cultures. Certain things you do can be a bad thing. Certain hand signals and the way you say things, the way people treat each other, and so on. My philosophy has always been 80% of business is business and 20% is culture. And so I respect the culture, but business is business and people are people. And so when I first went to Japan, my first time, I went to Tokyo, and I walked in the office. And, when you're an executive, it's a really big deal for an executive American-based company to visit. And the gal behind the front desk got up and immediately came around, got on her knees and bowed. And I said, no, stand up. And I said, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be insulting or anything. We're not going to do that with me. I'm not worthy of you bowing. So I appreciate it, but no more. And so, I got to know people there. I went and stood in, there's a support office that had about 200 people. And so I went and got on a chair. If you ever seen the movie Norma Ray, stood up on the chair and just said, let me get your attention. And I'm sure most of them probably didn't understand what I was saying, but there was people translating and so on. And I said, my name's Joe Sexton, and here's the way we're going to do things. Everybody here matters. This is a team effort. It's the only way we're going to win is to be a team. And so I started driving that from early on. But the first time I went, when I was on the plane going over there, I knew a big deal there was karaoke. So, management would go out, at night and do karaoke. And I hate karaoke. I'm not a good singer. So the first thing I had to solve for was, what am I going to sing? Because they're going to ask me to do a karaoke song.
You already come up with a good one.
Yeah, so I came up with Sweet Caroline.
Oh, that's a really good one.
Yeah, because, most of the song is like, everybody, sweet Caroline. So I could get
the audience
everybody
involved.
singing, right? So I had that solved. And so we're getting ready to go out to karaoke, and it's all the guys. And I said, what about the gals in the office? I mean, we're building a team here and so on. They said, no, Joe-san, they don't go to karaoke. I said, I'm not going. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you can't have the women go, that's not a team. So they're every bit as part of our team as you guys. And so if we're going to go, we're going to have the women go. Well, that's not the way it goes. And I said, well, that's the way it goes if I'm here. So I'll go back to my hotel. You guys have fun. Okay, Joe-san. So we bring the women, and I made them sit guy, girl, all the way around. So it was, and by the end of the night, the thing you learn about karaoke in Japan, first of all, is the quietest guy is the one with a tie around his forehead and won't let go of the microphone. So
they're very serious.
They're very serious, and there's a whole different person when you have karaoke. But at the end of the night, they were doing duets, the guys and girls, and they had the best time. And I think it sent a message to them. And
then when you retired, didn't they send you that card?
Yeah, they sent me a huge.
Not retired, but when you left McAfee.
Yeah, when I left McAfee, they sent me like this 3-foot by 3-foot card, and everybody in the office signed it and said how much I meant to them and so on. And so it was.
You still have that card? I put it in the office in Texas.
Yeah. It was a great memory. Great people. Love Japan. Love Tokyo. We've been, and just the food. The Tokyo is a great city. The people are great.
Kyoto.
Yeah, Kyoto was fun.
Amazing.
But yeah, it was a great experience, and And I just, kind of convinced myself, and I kind of knew this, that, the culture was part of it, but people are people. And, getting them to work together, I think they found out for themselves. It's much more fun and much more productive and much more successful.
With my whole social media influencing, I go live, I get on my stories, I just talk, right? And a lot of people don't do that. But from doing that, the feedback I get all the time is, because you do that, I feel like I know you.
Yeah.
Or they'll meet you and they'll say, I feel like I know Joe.
Yeah.
Because it's just a personal touch.
Yep.
And it reminds me of also the weekly call that you would do with everybody, just once a week. And it was called Joe Time.
Yeah. So,
and I feel like that was used, like everybody felt like they got to know you.
yeah, I started this at Mercury, and I carried it over to McAfee, and I actually had hired this company. I think their name was SMP. But anyway, they were a company that did this professionally. And what they would do, and wherever I was, so I was, trotting around somewhere around the world, is we would do this Joe Time. And it was top of mind things for me. So maybe one thing, two things, no more than three things, and no more than 2 minutes long. That was the rule, because nobody wants to listen to somebody yammer every Friday, about things they don't really care about. So it was very tight. It was very concise. And wherever I was, I would call this company and they would record it, and then they would edit it. So they're really good at editing it and getting it down tight in a 2 minute kind of blurb. And I would start it out, this is Joe coming to you semi-live from wherever I was.
Oh, come on, Joe. You got to do better than that.
The way I would start is, hello, everybody. This is Joe coming to you semi-live from Tokyo, right, or wherever I was. Like, where's Waldo?
It was so good, because I listened back to several of them, and then I put together that video at your retirement party, and it would replay some of them.
Yeah.
And wherever you were in the world, it was so amazing, and you were like so energetic.
Yeah.
Coming to you semi-live from Tokyo. It was amazing.
Yeah. And it was usually something to do with where I was. It could be something really big. We had some big issues we had to deal with at McAfee. So, but I think it's almost like when you watch a TV program every week, if you met that person on the street, you would feel like you knew them, right? Because they're coming into your home. And I had people tell me that they would let their spouse listen in, it's like, you got to hear this guy. And it was just my way of, like, every week touching them and kind of sharing with them what I thought was important. And so we could kind of all be together in terms of what's important to the organization. And so I've done that, throughout my career. Started at Mercury, like I said, did it at McAfee, even did it at App Dynamics. But it was just my way. And I know a lot of my leaders that have worked for me have gone on and have their own version, because it really works, and it's a great way for people to feel like they're connected. And
the wives.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Because you go to the kickoffs, and the wives felt like they knew you too.
Yeah. And the thing I learned at clubs, we'd have these club trips, which were a reward. So when you made your quota or whatever the criteria was, you would be selected to come to these exotic trips, and that's part of high tech. It's just part of the culture. But I always said those trips are really for the spouses or for the friends or whatever, because especially for, the spouses, you wanted them, getting on their husband or wife to say, okay, I don't know what you got to do to come back here next year or wherever they're going to go, but what's your forecast look like? So I always had guys tell me, and girls would be like, my hardest forecast is not with you, it's with my spouse, because, they're really wanting to go on the next club trip. And so we made sure that the spouses in particular were treated like royalty, because we knew that was the big influence. And, quite frankly, we always also said thank you, because they were the ones making the sacrifice, because, their husband or wife were off trotting around, in a lot of time away from the family and so on, working on behalf of the company.
So I'm assuming you have to be able to put fires out as well. And I think probably the whole audience knows the company CrowdStrike. And probably familiar with what happened a few years ago, or a couple of years ago, where they had a worldwide outage, essentially attack. Well, something similar happened to you guys, where you ended up in a gym fixing a breach of some sort.
Well, so with CrowdStrike, it was an inadvertent thing that got put into one of the releases that shut everybody down, and it was a mistake. and it caused a lot of pain because a lot of companies around the world,
American Airlines.
yeah, their systems went down, and so they literally couldn't use them.
911.
And George, who was with me at McAfee, so he had been through this before, and I even texted him and said, you know, you're going to get through this because you've been through it before. It's not easy. It's not fun. And sure enough, CrowdStrike got through it. But at McAfee, the way it worked there was every day you would send out what was called DAT files. And DAT files were looking for viruses that had been identified. And so they would block them. And every day you got this update. It was called a DAT file. And DAT file number 5958, I remember the number. DeWalt actually got it tattooed, I think, on his arm. Because what happened was we were sitting in an executive meeting in California, worldwide, so all the worldwide leaders were there. And early in the morning California time, and Barry McPherson, who ran support, said, oh no, I think it was Australia's down. And we're like, what? And it's like, yeah, all these sites in Australia are going down, so we'll keep an eye on that. And next thing you know, I think it was Japan, and then it was Europe. And then we knew, oh no, there's something big going on. And what had happened was it was called a bad DAT file. And so instead of, preventing bad things, which were the viruses, it was preventing good things. And literally thousands of companies and thousands of, probably millions of people could not use their computers. And to put it in perspective, there was stories where, like a 911 service was, out of commission, and a cop shows up to a domestic dispute and didn't know that, and something bad happened, and hospitals wouldn't work. Burger Kings, I remember you couldn't go through the drive-through. Literally businesses were shut down around the world and did material damage. And so to DeWalt's credit, and he was kind of the leader of this. He's like, okay, this meeting's over. What we're going to do over the next 2 days is we're going to divide and conquer. So each person in here is going to get a set number of accounts, and we're going to individually talk to them. And we're going to tell them that we're sorry this happened. It's our fault, all our fault, and we're going to fix it. And so for the next 2 days, we called something like 5,000 companies, literally, individually. And that was the beginning. And to tell you how bad it was, so Intel, which is what's interesting, is the one you're speaking about, is they had a situation where they had thousands of employees in Phoenix, I think is where it was. And literally, so it did what was called made your computer a brick. So you couldn't bring it back. You couldn't turn it back on. It just wiped everything. So we literally had to have people in a cafeteria, I remember, go through line while they're eating lunch, leave their computer. We'd reinstall the image so the computer would work again while they're eating lunch. Mm-hmm. And thousands of people had to do this, and it was all over the world. And it's one of the reasons why Intel bought us, is because, and they bought us for $7.7 billion, because they saw how good our customer service was. We didn't try to hide behind it. We didn't try. I remember that Apple had something similar where, and I don't remember the issue, but it was something to do with an antenna or something, and they did the same kind of thing, and they spent all their time trying to defend themselves that it's not really our fault. You must have done something wrong. And there was a case study done, I think it was Harvard Business Review, about how McAfee did it the right way and Apple did it the wrong way. Mm-hmm. But that sense of accountability, we're not trying to dodge it. We're not trying to make excuses, say it's your fault, try to figure out whose fault it is. No, it's our fault. And that was a very valuable lesson, and really something that I learned, throughout my career from that painful thing. It was
so stressful.
And the thing about it is, from a sales perspective, it doesn't help, because you got all these upset customers, and you got to try to work out, because literally some of them lost, millions of dollars mm-hmm. in revenue and services and so on. So it was a very painful thing to work through, but we got through it. And like I said, I think DeWalt's got that tattooed on his arm now.
Had some pretty adventurous international trips, and I remember one specifically in mind when you were telling me about Mexico.
Yeah. The first time I went to Mexico, the movie Man on Fire had come out, and of course that's about the kidnapping situation down in Mexico. And Brazil was also hairy, but you always had to be on your guard in either Brazil or Mexico. And Mexico City, I remember the first time I got there, I got in the car with my rep and a partner. So the partner was driving, and I said, first time to Mexico, happy to be here, with the company and so on. And the thing that was always little bit nerve-wracking was when you're an executive in an American company, and I think McAfee had a $500,000 policy on me. So, Mexico back then, I'm not sure how it is now. I'm sure maybe similar, but kidnapping was like a business. I mean, so they had even spreadsheets they would run, like, how much money they could get for kidnapping Mexican people versus business executives and so on. So there was a pretty lofty price on my head, being an American businessman. And they would tell me, look, when we're out, don't be talking, right? Don't let people know you're an American executive, because we wore suits and so on back then. But anyway, the first time I'm there, I'm said, just watch this this movie, Man on Fire. Is it true? And they're like, oh yeah. As a matter of fact, and all of a sudden he pulls a gun out. So he's got it beside his console, and he goes, see that? And he's like, pulls his gun out like really fast. He goes, what do you think about that? And I said, well, that's impressive, but so what? And he goes, well, I'll tell you so what. He said, I've always had this gun, for my protection. And one day I'm down in the center of Mexico City where there's this big plaza, and huge plaza. There's thousands and thousands of people on a Saturday. And I'm down there to get some speakers, and all of a sudden I feel this cold nuzzle, this muzzle up next to my head, and it's a guy, and he's saying, I'm kidnapping you. You're coming with me. And we're going to go, and we're going to hit ATM machines, and you're taking me to your house, and, and he said, I'm in trouble. So he takes me back to my car, and he's standing on this side, so I'm in the driver's seat, and he's standing there with a gun on me. And all of a sudden a sports car goes, kind of on the other side, and he looks up to look at the sports car. And he said, that's when the gun came in handy. So I whipped out my gun, and I shot him in the stomach. And the guy backed up, and he kind of realized what had happened. So he starts raising the gun. He said, I put the gun on his chest, and I pulled the trigger. And I killed him dead on the spot. And I'm sitting there in the back seat. I'm like, are you serious? And he goes, yeah. He goes, that's not what's bad. He goes, while kidnapping is bad down here, murder is really bad. So I had to go in hiding for 2 weeks while my lawyers negotiated with the government, in essence, that I was in the right. And I said, wow. I said, that's incredible. And he goes, yeah, so that's why I have my gun here. And then my rep says, well, tell me your other kidnapping story. I said, you got kidnapped again? He goes, yeah. He goes, so I'm going from my house to fly to Monterey, and I'm going to the airport, and this car pulls up next to me. It's 5 a.m, so I'm taking this early morning flight, and 2 guys in a suit, put a gun on me and say, we're the police, pull over. He goes, well, I knew they weren't the police, but they had a gun on me. So I pull over, and they pulled in front of me, and another car pulled behind me. And a guy jumps in the back seat. And by the way, this is before he started carrying the gun. So the guy jumps in the back seat, and the guy jumps in the front seat. And they said, drive. And they had a gun on him in the back. And they take him to this barrio, and he said, middle of nowhere, and dogs are out playing and with the kids and people on the porch, and nobody cares. And he said, they take my watch, they take my money. And then the guy in the front seat says, okay, what do we do with him? And the guy in the back seat said, well, he's seen us, we need to kill him. And he said, so they argued for about another 20 minutes back and forth. And the guy in the front seat's like, no, he's not going to say anything, right? And he's like, no, I'm not going to say anything. The guy in the back seat said, let's just kill him. And he said, for 20 minutes that goes on. And so finally they said, look, we're going to let you go. But if you turn around and look at me, this is the guy in the back seat, I'm going to blow your head off. And he goes, so for the couple minutes that I was leaving, that was the most nerve-wracking, because I thought, he's going to shoot me in the back of the head, and I'll be done. And he said, so I got away from that. And I looked at my rep and I said, so when are we leaving? Because it was pretty intense. And so in Mexico City, and when we went down to Sao Paulo and Rio, you always had to be on guard. And I remember after that trip, I insisted on, anytime I went to Mexico or Brazil, being in a bulletproof Suburban, and the driver was always packing, and it made me feel a little better. And I remember one time in Mexico, we had this driver, and he'd been with us all week, and at the end of the week, I said, I want to go to a real taqueria, right? I mean, the tacos are so different down there than, I think Taco Bell opened in Mexico City, was open for a month, because nobody understood cheese and sour cream and all that. It's just meat and lime, and it's fantastic. So we pull up to this taqueria, and I said, Juan, you coming with us? And my guys are like, oh, no, he doesn't come. And I said, so I go over, and I'm sitting there, and I look back, and I said, this is not right. I mean, he's been with us all week. he just joined us for lunch. What's he going to eat for lunch? And they said, well, that's not the way we do it down here. The help doesn't come with the executives. And I said, well, that's not the way we're doing it. So I go back over and I said, Juan, come over and have lunch. And I looked at my guys when I got back. I said, if anybody's not going to eat, it's going to be you. I said, because Juan's the one taking care of me, not you guys. And so ended up sitting there talking with Juan, and he was a citizen of, it was both. So he went back Mexico and America in Phoenix, and he had fascinating, spoke great English, learned a lot about the Mexican culture and so forth. And, it's just tried to set an example that, you take care of people that take care of you. And that's what I told my guys after we had lunch. I said, it has nothing to do with his position. I always had the philosophy that you had to be open-minded to learn something from anybody. Like some of the best ideas I ever got was from my admin, right? And because everybody has ideas, and, no matter what role they have, you got to hear them out. And that was just a great example of, this was somebody that I learned a lot from. He was taking care of me. We're certainly going to take care of him.
Wow. Glad you made it out safe. So what are some of the motivational tactics that you kept employees feeling appreciated, engaged along the way?
I think there's a couple things. From a sales perspective, some of the fun things I remember we did, we had the awards I talked about and so forth, but then we had, our big award, which was company kickoff. And that's where you recognize your top performers and so forth. And so we had one in particular we did in Las Vegas. And back then, the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was popular, right? And so what we did is we got something like probably 50 people, literally. It was an entire year's worth, but all roles, inside sales, field sales, SEs, partners, anybody in the organization, the top performers got to be on stage. And we had 50 suitcases, if I remember right. And in the suitcases were, either $500 was the lowest and $50,000 was the highest. And then there was a couple for $10,000 and a couple for $5,000 and so on. So each person I would go to and say, deal or no deal, I'd give you $1,000 in gambling chips, or you could say no deal and take your chances. And you may win $500, so you'd lose $500. So anyway, the only thing I knew, because I knew where the $50,000 case was. It was the next to last guy on my right. So I knew that. That's the only thing I knew. So I deliberately started on the left. And so we worked our way through. And as you got closer and closer, and some people won $5, $10, some people $500, but the crowd got intense. I mean, they were screaming and hollering because, it was obvious that the $50,000 was, out there somewhere. And so we literally got to next to the last person and they won it. And so that was one that got everybody fired up. And then we had a thing where we had we had a big stack of playing cards that were literally like 6 feet tall. And we shuffled them up, and I already had this insured. So if somebody got a royal flush, we had 3 people, 2 of the top field reps and I think a top inside rep that got to participate. And if anybody got a royal flush, they won $1 million.
Wow.
And I was cheering for them because I'd insured it. So I paid $50,000 from the company to sponsor this. And so for me, might as well see him win $1 million. And one rep I remember had a 10, a jack, an ace, and a king of the same suit. And it came down to the last card. And they were shuffled, so it was all random. And again, people were going crazy over that. So that was probably one of the things I remember. We used to give away a car. I think it was a Porsche. So the top rep would get a Porsche, and we had it roll down on stage. And so that was some fun things. The other thing, though, I think that I tried to do, and again, I tried to be, my philosophy of leadership is to be a servant, right? If you help people get what they want, you'll get everything you want. And so I always tried to remember the people who were an afterthought to a lot of folks. And I'll give you an example. So after each quarter was done, there was a RevOps group. And these people were, compared to sales reps and so on, were not as well paid, let's just say. I mean, they didn't make a lot of money. And when the quarter closed, we either left at midnight or 2 a.m, depending on when the last deal came in Dallas. But these people stayed all night. And then they came in the next day and they worked again all night. And they were the ones that booked the business. So if they didn't do their job, we didn't have our job done. But they're the type of people that they're an afterthought, right? So, but what I did was each end of quarter, I would go in, the last thing I did, and just tell them thank you and shake each of their hands and how much I appreciated them, because my philosophy was we didn't win unless they were there. And I think that meant a lot to them. And again, no matter what time of night, I'd stop in and do that. The other thing is after the quarter was over, Terry, my admin, and I would go around to support. So remember, these are support people that don't make a lot of money. All they're hearing is problems all day, but they're the ones that keep the customers happy. The RevOps people I was telling you about, kind of the, afterthought to a lot of folks, but we would get an ice cream cart and go around to each individual. And I think support had a couple hundred people. I mean, there's a lot of people. RevOps had a smaller team, but we would go around to each one of those people, and I would serve them an ice cream sundae. And Terry would roll the cart, and it'd be like, what do you want on it? Had all the fixings. And each individual, while I was making their sundae, I'd talk to them about who you are and what you do and how much I appreciate you and so on. And I did that on a quarter-by-quarter basis. And I think people appreciated that because I appreciated them. And then the other thing is quarter end would be a couple days, pretty intense. And I'd make my managers, not make them, but I'd strongly encourage them to get into a serving line with me. So we would have, for example, Babe's Chicken. So if you're familiar with Dallas, Babe's Chicken is the best chicken you can have. The people from California used to really love it because they couldn't get it out here. But we would stand in line, and everybody would come through in the Plano office, and we'd serve them lunch. And I'd serve them the chicken, so-and-so would do the mashed potatoes, green beans, and all that. So each manager had a station, and we just said, thanks. Who are you? What do you do? Really appreciate you. And that was on a quarterly basis. And I think people appreciated that because we appreciated them.
I love that.
Yeah.
And that also reminds me back to what you're saying about Dave.
Yeah. It was a great example he set, and, we kind of really did it on a consistent basis. And I think my managers really enjoyed it. I mean, because again, it was just a moment to, say thanks to people and make them feel appreciated because, they were. And I think just taking the time to do that made a big difference.
We can't go away without talking about your one-liners.
Yeah, well,
you were so famous for all these sayings. We've talked about it on other podcasts, but it was so funny what your team did with you with the little parody on Rosetta Stone. Yeah, so McAfee and his team, Braden Rogers and Brian Kenyon, and just a whole team of folks. Again, I'll forget names, so I'm not going to try to mention them all. But unbeknownst to me, they put together a video. So I had a lot of, shy salesmen have skinny kids. That was probably the one I was most known for, but I had a bunch of them. And I've always had this philosophy that, people understand what you're saying if you use analogies or, if you use kind of one-liners. Some of them they didn't understand because you had to be from the South, I guess, but a lot of them they did. And it was a way to make a point and to also make them remember. And so unbeknownst to me, we're having this big meeting, and DeWalt's up there, and it's an entire company meeting. So it's in Plano, so there's probably 1,000 people in the audience, and it's being broadcast all over the world. And I'm sitting in the front row, and they put together this video called Josetta Stone, which was a takeoff of Rosetta Stone. And it's really funny. And it was professionally done. I mean, they unbeknownst to me, got a video crew and so on and shot this thing, and it lasted 2.5 minutes. And DeWalt's like, we got this one video we want to show you, and it's pretty funny. And all of a sudden they roll this thing, and I'm just like watching it for myself the first time along with everybody else, and it was quite hilarious. And yeah, Josetta Stone. Well, I have a surprise for you.
Yeah.
I found it.
Oh, you did?
So I'm going to play it for you.
Okay.
And everybody.
Yeah.
It's so freaking funny.
Are you one of the thousands of people that can't tell what in tarnation Joe Sexton is saying? Do you get frustrated at the nonsensical ramblings of a man from Kentucky? Then you haven't tried Josetta Stone.
I've probably learned more in the first 2 weeks than I have in years of reporting to him. Now I realize why shy sales reps have skinny kids.
Josetta Stone is so fast and effective. Joe's wife, his kids, Even Dave DeWalt used it. You'll learn key phrases, such as, put a stick in the cage, we're in high cotton now, I think there's a pony in there, and my personal favorite, Symantec had another poopy diaper.
This is not memorization at all, but it is the fastest way to turn a thick Southern drawl into recognizable, coherent English.
And to help you get started, we'll send your first lesson free, faster than a greased pig.
This program helps me do something I really want to do, which is help me understand what the hell that man's talking about. Now I don't feel like a monkey holding a stick of dynamite.
Call now or visit our website to see why Josetta Stone is the fastest way to learn Sextonese. Because as you know, the only thing you get from sitting on the fence is a sore hind end.
Sweet. Yeah. So I saw that for the first time in front of about 1,000 people plus a worldwide audience. It was funny.
I mean, what an impact, right?
Yeah, it was very, very kind of them to do that, and it was funny, and yeah, it brought back some good memories.
So I was going to tell you before we wrap up, I want to ask you about you leaving McAfee, which obviously was a huge deal. I think I told you the story 10 years ago, but you left McAfee, you ended up going to a startup company called App Dynamics, and that's when we met,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So we were only dating for a few months or something. Mm-hmm. And we didn't talk about work a whole lot, but I remember I get up one morning and I'm peeing and with my phone in my hand. And you know, you go into the Google search and you could pull up like somebody or something, and let's say you put in a letter or two or three or four or five, and then it starts pulling it up for you automatically. Mm-hmm. So I'm peeing, right? I'm looking at my phone. I put in the J, I put in the O, I put in the E, I put in the S, and your name popped up. And I looked, and I go, who is this guy? Because we were dating at the time, and obviously I knew you were, but I was like, what in the world? How in the world did you pull up of everyone called Joe, and then your last name was, Sexton, but I put in the S and you pulled up.
Yeah.
And then I clicked on the article, and there's two articles. Mm-hmm. One was about a surfer, or he's a famous, what is he? Joe Sexton is a famous...
I think he's a famous surfer.
Yeah,
wakeboarder.
And then the other article was, there was 10 articles about you leaving McAfee. And I was like, wow, this was a really, really big deal, not only for you, but for all the employees that you were leaving, because, you're sitting here and telling all these stories and you had such an impact on so many lives.
Yeah.
So I obviously want to ask you, how did it come to an end?
Well, I think, for me, we got acquired by Intel, which was treated everybody great. I mean, I stayed probably a year maybe after that. And DeCesar was made president. I became the worldwide leader of sales, and they treated me, pay you more money you deserve, and it's just a great company, Intel. But for me, it was like, I want to do something as a startup, and I talked to Dave, and he'd actually gone. His first company he was going to do after McAfee was a little company called Palo Alto. And Palo Alto, which is now this huge, gargantuan company, was, I think, $25 million at the time. They were really, really small. Now they're billions, probably $8-9 billion. But he was telling me about it, and he said, they make something really hard, which was a firewall, really easy. And it's the consumerization of enterprise software is what he called it, where enterprises or businesses can use software much like consumers. He said, you got to look at companies like this. And so it kind of intrigued me. Now he ended up not doing that at Palo Alto, but I went and talked to him and loved the CEO at the time, Mark McLaughlin, and Ashim Chandra, who was at the Greylock. I got to know the entire team. And anyway, I ended up coming in second. So there's a guy named, I think it was Mark Anderson, who did great things, had a great ride at Palo Alto. But it got me to look. And so I found App Dynamics, which was, again, small little company, 20-some million, similar situation, and I decided to leave. And, I went and talked to the folks at Intel and just said, I think I'm going to go and do a startup. They didn't like it, but, it was what it was. And so I announced to the company I was leaving, and the very last thing we did was the lunch line in McAfee in Plano, and had all my leaders and myself, and we served lunch to all the employees, and it was pretty emotional. I mean, there was folks crying and so on, and it was very moving for me. But it was a chance to say goodbye, and how much fun it had been, and what a great run we had, and kind of reminiscing where we started, which was in the toilet with $1.2 billion. It sounds like a lot, but it was a disaster, and ended up doubling the business, and people did well in their careers, well for their families. And one of the things I was most proud of looking back was, when I first got there was no charities. And I've always believed that people stay with a company, A, for their leader. Compensation matters, but they also want to feel like they're working for somebody who, makes a difference. And so there was no charities in place. And for me, my favorite charity since college has been St. Jude's, which is children's cancer. And I've always felt like, the most unfair thing there can be is a child with cancer. I mean, you can pick a lot of charities and make a good point that, this is a good one to care about. But for me, that's just so unfair. And St. Jude's, one of those organizations, if you're allowed to be in their hospital, the family doesn't have to worry about paying for anything. So it's like at the worst moment of their lives, they don't have to worry about the financial part. So we started a charity drive for St. Jude's. And so we'd have a fun run walk in the spring and a golf tournament in the fall. And we made it kind of a company-wide thing, and really took off. I remember meeting somebody one time who worked for McAfee, and she said, I'm an original St. Jude's person. And I said, really? She said, yeah, the first year they were open, I was a patient. And she said that I was in there with my mom, and I remember my mom saying to the doctor, I'm taking her out of here. And I had leukemia, and the doctor said, why? She goes, because everybody's dying in here. And I think the death rate, I'm going to get it wrong, but it was something like 94% of the kids were dying who had childhood leukemia. Now, they had since flipped that, and I think 94% of the kids now live. But she said, everybody's dying, and the doctor said, you have no idea. This is the only place you have a chance. I know it's a low probability, but everybody's dying everywhere else. And so she said, I stayed, and here I am. And, we had kids would come and who were St. Jude's kids and speak and so forth. Well, anyway, I started getting some feedback. Why does it have to be St. Jude's? I mean, I care about this and that. And so we formed a committee. My admin, Terry, headed it up with about 6 people in the company, and it was a charity committee. And when I left, there was 125 charities. So we went from 0 to 125 because the deal was if you have one that you care about, then okay, let's, and the company would match it. And I firmly believe that, that really changed people's feelings about working at McAfee, because it was no longer about just a paycheck and a place to work, but a place that made a difference. And I look back at that, and that's one of the most, my proudest probably thing to think about is that, because it really brought everybody together in the company, made them feel like they were, part of something bigger than just a job.
Well, before we wrap it up, is there anything else that you would love to share?
I'll tell you a couple funny stories to kind of finish, because sales reps have always been fascinating to me, and I have this saying, monkey with a stick of dynamite, and everybody says, what's that mean? And I've always looked at salespeople, sales leaders even, you just never know what they're going to say, never know what they're going to do. It never ceases to amaze me, some of the things they'll do or some of the creativity. I'll tell you 2 stories. The first one was I had a sales rep one time, and we're down in middle Georgia somewhere in the backwoods of Georgia, and he's a young, fresh out of college sales rep, and we come down to the hotel lobby the next morning, and he's like, Mr. Sexton, you're not going to believe this. Look. And he opens up his suitcase, and he's got all these like things from the fridge up in the, like the little shots of alcohol and snacks and so on, and his suitcase is packed with them. He goes, you believe this? They put this in my room, and it's just free for me to use. I said, take that back to your room right now. And he's like, why? I said, because that's not free. They're going to charge you for that. He goes, are you serious? I'm dead serious. So that was a funny one. And then the other one I'd tell is, you never know how creative they can be. So I had a rep, and he's telling me it was a Sunday night, and he gets to where he's going, and the worldwide leader of sales is coming in. Big deal. It was with CA at the time out of New York. And he forgot his socks. And so this was back in the day where, you had to wear socks. Especially, you had a suit and tie. You got a worldwide leader of sales coming in. He forgot his shoes. One of his shoes was missing. He said, "So
That's
I
even
had."
worse.
I know. So he didn't have both shoes. He only had one. And I said, "So what'd you do?" He said, "Well, I was going to be there for the whole week, so I took 8 socks and I put 7 of them on one foot. And when I met him coming off the plane, I was limping, and I said I'd sprained my ankle and I couldn't put my shoe on." I said that's brilliant.
Smart.
He said, so that's how I got around that. So anyway, I've always said that you just never know what they're going to say. You never know what they're going to do. And they're like a monkey with a stick of dynamite. They're kind of standing there and looking around, and everybody's diving for cover, and they've got this stick of dynamite that's going, and that's where that saying comes from.
Well, before we wrap it up, you did have an amazing retirement party, and a lot of the folks that were there were people that you impacted over the years, especially from McAfee.
Yeah.
It was really incredible to see the personal stories that they shared. And we had amazing stations. Remember, it was the cigar rolling
Yep.
station, the bourbon, because you like your old fashions.
Dom Perignon on each table. And it was great.
Dom Perignon and lobster and steak.
Yep.
And you were surprised, by the way. It was a surprise party. You didn't know about it.
Yeah, it was shocking. I remember you had told me we were going to a relative's wedding anniversary who I didn't know, and I'm sitting there thinking, gosh, this is going to be miserable. And but trying to be a good sport, we go down to Fort Worth, and I remember coming around the corner, and there was this huge crowd standing there, and I'm thinking, man, because I'm looking at people and I'm recognizing people, and I'm thinking, these people who are your relatives know a lot of people I know. How odd is that? And then I finally figured it out when I saw my mom standing there, and it ended up being a great night. And it was great to see old friends from all across my career, and it was fantastic.
That was a good time. So on the next episode of your career, I would love to talk about you becoming the president of a startup company, which is one of the hardest things you can do.
Yep.
Of App Dynamics, and going from 28 million in bookings to 28 million in bookings to 217 million in bookings.
272, but who's counting?
And ending in a $3.7 billion exit.
Yep.
Which you had a huge impact on.
Yep.
And that ends your career full time.
Yeah.
And then you sat on boards like CrowdStrike and other companies, which is what you're doing now.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So McAfee was probably, as I look back, that was when I was at my best, because I had such a strong team. App Dynamics was really, really fun. I had some great people. It's a great story to tell and great outcome and so on. But I'm probably look back at McAfee as when I look at the things we were able to do there and at the size, right? Mm-hmm. So 7,000 people is a big company, and it's a lot of things to influence and change. And I look back at that time. 5 years was one of the best times of my career.
I love that. Well, thank you, honey.
Okay.
I appreciate this so much.
All right.
Okay.
We'll talk next time.
Okay.